Marcus Blackwell stepped out of his private jet at the small airstrip outside Millfield, the town he had left 25 years ago with nothing but a torn backpack and burning ambition. Now, at 47, he owned tech companies across 3 continents, had his name on buildings in major cities, and commanded respect in boardrooms around the world. But today, none of that mattered. Today, he was just a son coming home because his father was dying. The chauffeur waiting by the black sedan looked surprised when Marcus waved him away and chose to drive the rental car himself. He needed time to think, to prepare for what awaited him at the old house on Maple Street. The GPS guided him through streets that looked smaller than he remembered, past the corner store where he had worked after school, past the high school where teachers had told him he would never amount to anything. 25 years of silence stretched between him and his father, Robert Blackwell. 25 years since that terrible fight when Marcus had announced he was leaving for Silicon Valley with his computer programming skills and big dreams. His father had called him a fool, said he would be back within a year, begging for his old job at the hardware store. Marcus had sworn that day he would never return, never speak to the man who had crushed his confidence at every turn. But now Robert was dying of lung cancer, and Marcus's assistant had received a call from the local hospital. The old man had no one else. Marcus's mother had passed away 10 years ago, and he had only learned about it through a brief mention in the local newspaper that his assistant monitored. He had not attended the funeral. The guilt from that decision had eaten at him ever since. The house looked exactly the same as when he had left. The white paint was peeling, the front porch sagged slightly, and the garden was overgrown with weeds. Marcus sat in the car for several minutes, remembering the boy who had grown up behind those walls, the boy who had been told daily that he was not smart enough, not strong enough, not good enough for anything beyond manual labor. He finally gathered his courage and walked up the cracked sidewalk. The spare key was still hidden under the ceramic frog by the front door, just as it had been when he was a teenager. Some things never changed in small towns. He let himself in, calling out softly. The house smelled of old cigarettes and something else, something medical and sad. Marcus walked through the living room, noting the ancient furniture, the faded photographs on the mantel that still included pictures of him as a child. His father had kept them all these years, even after their bitter separation. He found his father in the bedroom at the back of the house, connected to an oxygen tank, looking frail and much older than his 72 years. Robert Blackwell had been a big man once, strong from years of physical labor. Now he seemed to have shrunk into himself, his skin gray and his breathing labored. "Dad," Marcus said quietly from the doorway. Robert's eyes opened slowly, and for a moment, Marcus saw confusion there. Then, recognition dawned, followed by something that might have been surprise or fear. "Marcus." Robert's voice was barely a whisper. "What are you doing here? I heard you were sick." "I came to help." Robert stared at his son for a long moment. Marcus had changed dramatically from the skinny 18-year-old who had stormed out of this house. He was taller somehow, filled out, wearing an expensive suit that probably cost more than Robert made in 6 months at the hardware store before he retired. There was confidence in his posture, success written in every line of his face. "I don't need your help," Robert said finally, but his voice lacked conviction. He tried to sit up straighter and was seized by a coughing fit that left him gasping. Marcus moved forward instinctively, wanting to help, but his father waved him away. The awkwardness between them was thick as fog. 25 years of hurt and pride stood like a wall between father and son. "Where's Mrs. Patterson?" Marcus asked, remembering the elderly neighbor who had always been kind to his mother. "Dead 3 years now," Robert said once he caught his breath. "Most of the old folks are gone." "Then, who's been taking care of you?" "I manage fine on my own." But Marcus could see that was not true. The house was dusty, dishes were piled in the sink, and his father's medication bottles were scattered across the nightstand in disorder. Robert had always been proud, but this was beyond pride. This was stubbornness that could kill him. "Dad, you can't live like this. You need help." "I said I'm fine." Robert's voice carried an echo of the authority it once had, but it was weak now, desperate. Marcus spent the next hour trying to convince his father to let him arrange for proper care, but Robert refused everything. A nursing home was out of the question. He would not have strangers in his house, and He certainly did not want charity from the son who had abandoned him. Finally, Marcus made a decision that surprised them both. I'm staying. What? I'm staying here until you're better. Or until. He could not finish the sentence. Robert stared at his son as if he had announced he was from Mars. You can't stay here. Don't you have important business things to do? Companies to run. I can work from anywhere. It's the 21st century, Dad. Everything is connected. You'll get bored and leave. Just like before. The words stung because they carried 25 years of hurt. Marcus had left, and, in his father's mind, that proved he was unreliable, just as Robert had always said. I'm not 18 anymore, Dad. When I make a commitment, I keep it. That first night, Marcus slept in his old bedroom, in the same twin bed he had used as a teenager. The room was exactly as he had left it, as if Robert had been expecting him to return any day. His old computer programming books were still on the shelf, the posters of early computer pioneers still on the walls. It was like stepping back in time. He lay awake for hours, listening to his father's labored breathing from the next room, wondering if he had made a terrible mistake. His lawyers were probably panicking. His board of directors would be confused by his sudden absence from important meetings. But, for the first time in years, Marcus felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. The next morning, he woke to the sound of someone moving around in the kitchen. For a moment, he thought his father had gotten up early. But, when he checked the bedroom, Robert was still asleep. Marcus crept toward the kitchen, unsure what to expect. A young woman stood at the stove, cooking eggs and bacon. She was perhaps 25, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing jeans and a faded t-shirt. She looked up when he entered, startled. Oh, you must be Marcus. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to wake you. I'm Elena Vasquez. Marcus was confused. I'm sorry, but who are you? And how did you get in? Elena smiled, and it transformed her whole face. I'm your father's caregiver. Well, sort of. I've been checking on him for the past few months. Mrs. Patterson used to do it, but, after she passed, someone needed to make sure he was eating and taking his medicine. My father didn't mention anyone helping him. He wouldn't. He's proud. Too proud for his own good sometimes. Elena turned back to the stove. He probably told you he was managing fine on his own. Exactly. He's been telling everyone that. Meanwhile, I've been coming by 3 times a week to clean, cook, and make sure he doesn't forget his medications. I let myself in because he usually pretends not to hear the doorbell. Marcus studied this young woman who had been caring for his father. There was something gentle in her manner, but also strong. She moved around the kitchen with familiar ease, clearly comfortable in the house. Are you a professional caregiver? Elena laughed. Hardly. I clean houses for a living. Your father's is one of my regular clients, or was before he got too sick to pay regularly. But I kept coming anyway. Someone had to. Marcus felt a stab of guilt. This stranger had been taking care of his father while he had been building his business empire, completely unaware of Robert's deteriorating condition. Why? He asked simply. Elena paused in her cooking. Because he's a good man who helped my family when we needed it most. When I was 16 and my mother was dying, Mr. Blackwell gave my father work at the hardware store even though business was slow. He didn't have to do that. We would have lost our house if not for that job. This was a side of his father that Marcus had never seen. Robert had always seemed harsh, critical, focused only on what was wrong rather than what was right. But Elena spoke of him with genuine affection. I never knew, Marcus said quietly. There's probably a lot you don't know about your father. He's not good at showing his feelings, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have them. Elena served breakfast and called Robert to join them. The old man appeared in the doorway wearing a robe that had seen better days, leaning heavily on a walker that looked like a recent addition to his life. Elena, you didn't need to cook for him too, Robert said, nodding toward Marcus. There's plenty. Besides, you both look like you could use a good meal. They ate in uncomfortable silence at first. Marcus tried to make conversation, asking about people he had known in high school, but most of Robert's answers were brief. Elena filled in the gaps, telling stories about the town, about families Marcus remembered, about changes that had happened over the years. The hardware store closed 2 years ago, she mentioned casually while clearing the dishes. Marcus looked at his father. Dad, why didn't you tell me? Why would I? Not like you cared about the store. I cared about you. Robert snorted. Sure you did. That's why you never called, never wrote. never came to your mother's funeral." The words hung in the air like smoke. Elena quietly excused herself to start cleaning, giving them privacy for a conversation that was 25 years overdue. "I didn't know about Mom until it was too late," Marcus said. "I tried to call the house, but the number had been disconnected. We had to cut the phone service. Couldn't afford it anymore with all the medical bills." Marcus had not known his parents had struggled financially. In his mind, they had continued their simple but stable life exactly as he had left it. The idea that they had suffered while he built his fortune made him feel sick. "Dad, if I had known, you didn't want to know. You made that clear when you left. I was 18. I was angry and hurt and stupid, but I never stopped caring about you and Mom." Robert studied his son's face, looking for lies, for the manipulation he expected from someone who had become successful in business. But he saw only pain, regret, and something that looked like the little boy Robert remembered from before everything had gone wrong between them. "Your mother talked about you every day," Robert said finally. "She kept track of your business stuff in the newspapers. She was proud of you, even if I was too stubborn to admit it." Tears stung Marcus's eyes. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry for leaving the way I did. I'm sorry for staying away. I'm sorry for everything." Robert nodded slowly. "Me too, son. Me too." It was not forgiveness, not yet. But it was a beginning. Over the next few days, Marcus settled into an unexpected routine. He worked in the mornings, conducting video conferences from his father's kitchen table while Robert slept late. Elena arrived around noon, bringing groceries and sunshine into the gloomy house. She and Marcus began working together to care for Robert, and slowly, the tension in the house began to ease. Marcus learned that Elena was studying nursing part-time while working multiple cleaning jobs to support herself and her younger brother. Her father had died in a construction accident 3 years earlier, leaving her as the family's primary breadwinner. She was 26, not 25 as he had first thought, and had put her own dreams on hold to take care of everyone around her. "Don't you ever want more?" Marcus asked her one afternoon while they folded Robert's laundry together. "Of course I do. But wanting and getting are two different things. Some of us don't have the luxury of chasing dreams." Her words reminded Marcus of his father's criticisms all those years ago. But from Elena, they didn't sound bitter, just realistic. She had accepted her responsibilities without resentment, something Marcus wasn't sure he could have done at her age. Robert's condition seemed to stabilize with proper care and medication management. He began eating regularly, taking his medicines on schedule, and even started sitting on the front porch in the afternoons to watch the neighborhood children play. But Marcus could see the disease was still progressing. His father tired easily, coughed frequently, and had difficulty breathing after even small exertions. Dr. Martinez, the family physician, was honest about the prognosis. "He has maybe 6 months, possibly less. The cancer has spread to his lymph nodes. At this stage, it's about comfort and quality of life, not cure." Marcus absorbed this information with the same calm he brought to difficult business decisions. But inside, he was falling apart. After 25 years of estrangement, 6 months seemed impossibly short to rebuild a relationship with his father. He began spending more time with Robert, learning about the man his father had become after he left. Robert told him about the customers he had helped at the hardware store, about the community projects he had supported, about the quiet acts of kindness he had performed without fanfare. Marcus realized his father had lived a good life, even if it was not the successful life Marcus had always measured things by. "I was wrong about you," Robert said one evening as they sat on the porch together. "You did make something of yourself, more than I ever imagined possible." "I was wrong too, Dad. I thought success meant leaving everything behind, proving I was better than where I came from. But this place, this life you built, it has value too. It took me 25 years to see that." As the days passed, Marcus found himself looking forward to Elena's visits more than he cared to admit. She brought energy and hope into the house, treating Robert with a combination of respect and gentle teasing that seemed to lift his spirits. She was smart, asking Marcus about his business with genuine curiosity, offering insights that sometimes surprised him with their wisdom. Marcus woke up early the next morning with his mind made up. He had spent half the night researching Elena's situation, and What he discovered had made him more determined than ever to help her. But he knew Elena well enough by now to realize that she would never accept charity, especially not from him. She was too proud, too independent. He would have to be clever about this. He started by calling the nursing school where Elena was enrolled. After some negotiation and a substantial donation to their scholarship fund, he arranged for an anonymous benefactor to cover Elena's full tuition for the remaining 2 years of her program. The school administrator was more than happy to cooperate when Marcus explained that he wanted to help a deserving student without taking credit for it. Next, he contacted Elena's landlord. It took some convincing and a significant financial incentive, but the man agreed to tell Elena that a long-term tenant had paid a year's rent in advance for her apartment. Marcus made it clear that Elena should never know the real source of the payment. The hardest part was arranging help for her brother without raising suspicions. Marcus solved this by creating a fictional mentorship program through his company's charitable foundation. Elena's brother would receive a scholarship for school expenses and a part-time job that would provide steady income for the family. By the time Elena arrived at the house that afternoon, Marcus had set everything in motion. He watched her carefully as she went about her usual routine of checking on Robert, organizing his medications, and preparing a simple lunch. She seemed tired, more so than usual, and Marcus noticed she only picked at her own food while making sure Robert ate everything on his plate. "Elena," Marcus said after they had settled Robert in the living room with his oxygen tank and afternoon medications, "can I talk to you about something?" She looked up from the dishes she was washing, a slight frown creasing her forehead. "Of course. What's on your mind?" "I've been thinking about your nursing studies. How much longer do you have?" Elena's hands stilled in the soapy water. 2 years, if I can manage to stay enrolled." "Why do you ask? You're clearly talented at caregiving. My father has improved dramatically since you've been looking after him. Have you thought about specializing in geriatric care or hospice work?" "I think about a lot of things," Elena said carefully. "But thinking and doing are 2 different realities for people like me." Before Marcus could respond, Elena's phone rang. She dried her hands quickly and answered, speaking in rapid Spanish. Marcus caught enough of the conversation to understand that someone was calling about her brother, and Elena's voice grew increasingly excited and confused. When she hung up, she stared at the phone as if it might explode. "I don't understand," she said slowly. "That was someone from your company." Marcus tried to look surprised. "My company? That's strange. What did they want?" "They said David, my brother, has been selected for some kind of mentorship program. Full scholarship for school, plus a part-time job with your charitable foundation. But I never applied for anything like that." "David never applied for anything like that." "That is odd," Marcus said, hoping his expression appeared genuinely puzzled. "Let me make some calls and see what I can find out. Sometimes these programs have automatic selection processes based on academic records and need assessments." Elena continued to stare at her phone. "It's too good to be true. Things like this don't happen to people like us. Maybe they should happen more often." That evening, Elena received 2 more calls that left her completely bewildered. The first was from her landlord, informing her that a previous tenant had prepaid her rent for a full year before moving out and wanted the money to go to the current occupant. The second was from her nursing school, explaining that she had been selected for a full scholarship based on her academic performance and financial need. Marcus watched Elena process this information with growing amazement and suspicion. She was intelligent enough to recognize that 3 pieces of extraordinary good fortune in one day was beyond the realm of coincidence. "Marcus," she said slowly, "did you do this?" "Do what?" "Don't play innocent with me. The scholarship, the rent, my brother's program. This is you, isn't it?" Marcus maintained his confused expression. "Elena, I honestly don't know what you're talking about. Yes, my company has various charitable programs, but I'm not involved in the day-to-day selection process. I've been here taking care of my father, remember? But the timing is too perfect. All of this happening right after we talked about my situation. Maybe the universe is finally giving you the break you deserve." Elena stared at him for a long moment, clearly not believing his denial but unable to prove anything. Finally, she shook her head. "If you did this, I can't accept it. It's too much. I don't take charity. And if I didn't do it, then you're turning down help that came from legitimate sources. Either way, You're letting pride get in the way of opportunities that could change your life. That night, Marcus overheard Elena on the phone with her brother, speaking in Spanish. David was ecstatic about the mentorship program, and Elena was trying to decide whether to let him accept it. Marcus understood enough of the conversation to know that Elena was torn between suspicion and hope, between her pride and her love for her brother. The next morning, Elena arrived at the house looking as if she hadn't slept. She went through her usual routine mechanically, but Marcus could see her mind was elsewhere. "I called the nursing school," she said abruptly while preparing Robert's morning medications. "I spoke to 3 different people. They all swear the scholarship is legitimate, completely separate from anything you might be involved with." "That's good news, then." "I also called my landlord. He showed me paperwork from the previous tenant. Everything looks official. So you're going to accept the help?" Elena was quiet for several minutes, organizing pills into daily containers with practiced efficiency. "Do you know what it's like to work 3 jobs and still not have enough money for food? Do you know what it's like to watch your little brother wear shoes with holes in them because you can't afford new ones?" "No," Marcus said honestly. "I don't. I've been doing that for 3 years. 3 years of choosing between groceries and textbooks, between keeping the lights on and paying for gas to get to school. And suddenly, in one day, all of those problems disappear? It doesn't feel real. Maybe that's because you've been struggling so long that you've forgotten what it feels like to catch a break." Elena looked at him sharply. "Is that what this is? A break? Or is this a very wealthy man who thinks he can solve people's problems with money?" The directness of her question caught Marcus off guard. He had expected her to be suspicious, but he hadn't expected her to confront him so openly. "If someone wanted to help you," he said carefully, "what would be wrong with that? Because help comes with expectations. Because people who give that much expect something in return. Because I've learned not to trust anything that seems too good to be true." Marcus felt a stab of pain at her words. In Elena's world, kindness came with a price tag. Generosity was suspect. Help was dangerous because it created obligations that might be impossible to fulfill. What if the person helping you expected nothing in return? What if they just wanted to see you succeed? Why would anyone do that? "Because you take care of my father without being asked or paid. Because you've been kind to an old man who isn't always easy to deal with. Because you deserve a chance to build the life you want." Elena stared at him for a long moment. "You did do this, didn't you?" Marcus sighed, knowing he couldn't maintain the pretense any longer. "If I did, would that make it wrong? Would that make the opportunities any less real or valuable? It would make me feel like a charity case." "You're not a charity case. You're a woman who works harder than anyone I know, who's putting herself through school while taking care of everyone around her. You're someone who deserves help, not someone who needs it because they're weak or incapable." Elena turned away from him, and Marcus could see her shoulders trembling slightly. When she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "Do you have any idea how hard it is to accept help when you've been taking care of yourself since you were 16? Do you know what it's like to have someone swoop in and solve all your problems like they're just items on a checklist?" Marcus had not considered this perspective. In his business world, problems were solved efficiently and completely. He had approached Elena's situation the same way he approached corporate challenges, with quick, decisive action and comprehensive solutions. He hadn't thought about how overwhelming that might feel to someone who was used to fighting for every small victory. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't think about how it would feel from your side. I just saw problems I could solve, and I solved them." "That's exactly what I'm talking about. You saw problems. But this isn't some broken computer system or failed business deal. This is my life. These are struggles that have shaped who I am, sacrifices that have meaning beyond just getting past them." Marcus realized he had made a fundamental mistake. In trying to help Elena, he had inadvertently diminished her strength, her resilience, her hard-fought independence. He had treated her like someone who needed rescuing rather than someone who had been successfully managing impossible circumstances. "You're right," he said. "I overstepped. I should have talked to you first, should have asked what kind of help you wanted, if any. But you didn't trust me enough to make that choice myself. It wasn't about trust. I was afraid you would say no. So you took away my right to say no." Marcus had no answer for that because Elena was absolutely right. He had circumvented her autonomy, her right to control her own life, even with the best intentions. Robert appeared in the doorway, moving slowly with his walker. What's all the arguing about? Sounded like a couple of cats fighting from the bedroom. Nothing, Mr. Blackwell, Elena said quickly, wiping her eyes. We were just discussing some changes in my schedule. Changes? What kind of changes? Elena looked at Marcus, clearly torn about what to tell the old man who had come to depend on her daily visits. Marcus realized that in his eagerness to help Elena, he hadn't considered how his actions might affect his father. Elena has been accepted for a nursing scholarship, Marcus explained. She might need to adjust her visits here to accommodate her class schedule. Robert's face fell. You're leaving? No, Elena said quickly. I don't know yet. I'm still deciding whether to accept the scholarship. Why wouldn't you accept it? Robert asked, genuinely confused. You've been studying to be a nurse for years. This is what you've been working toward. It's complicated. Robert looked between Elena and his son, clearly sensing undercurrents he didn't understand. Seems simple to me. Someone's offering you help to finish school. You take it. Only a fool turns down help when they need it. Marcus winced at his father's words, remembering how many times Robert had refused help over the years, how he had stubbornly insisted on managing everything alone even when it was clearly beyond his capabilities. Sometimes help comes with strings attached, Elena said carefully. What kind of strings? Robert demanded, looking directly at Marcus. The question hung in the air between them. Marcus could lie, could maintain the fiction that the help was coming from anonymous sources. But Elena deserved better than that, and, surprisingly, so did his father. I arranged the scholarship and the other assistance, Marcus said simply. I thought I was helping, but Elena feels like I overstepped boundaries. Robert was quiet for several minutes, studying both of them with sharp eyes that seemed more alert than they had been in weeks. Finally, he spoke. Elena, how much do you know about Marcus when he was young? Dad, that's not relevant. Shut up, boy. I'm talking to Elena. Robert turned to face her more directly. Marcus was the smartest kid in this town. Smarter than his teachers half the time. But I was too proud and too stupid to see it. I kept telling him he needed to be practical, to settle for what was available instead of reaching for what seemed impossible. Elena glanced at Marcus, who looked uncomfortable with where this conversation was heading. When he told me he wanted to go to California and start a computer business, I laughed at him, called him a dreamer, said he'd be back in 6 months, broke and embarrassed. I was wrong about everything. Dad, I said, shut up. Elena, you know why my son never came home all these years? Because I taught him that taking chances was stupid, that asking for help was weakness, that pride was more important than progress. Robert paused to catch his breath, the long speech having exhausted him. Now he's trying to give you the kind of help I was too stubborn to give him. Maybe he went about it wrong, but his heart's in the right place. Elena looked at Marcus with new understanding. You're trying to be the person you wished your father had been. Maybe, Marcus said quietly. Or maybe I'm just trying to fix something that can't be fixed by throwing money at it. Money doesn't fix everything, Elena agreed. But it can remove obstacles that keep people from fixing things themselves. Over the next few hours, the three of them talked more openly than they ever had before. Robert told stories about Marcus as a child, about the boy who had taken apart every electronic device in the house to see how it worked, who had taught himself programming from library books, who had dreams that seemed impossible in a small town with limited opportunities. Elena shared her own story, about the fear that had driven her decisions since her father's death, about the responsibility she felt for her brother's future, about the dream she had put on hold because survival had to come first. Marcus listened to both of them, beginning to understand how his good intentions had created new complications. He had tried to solve Elena's problems the same way he solved business problems, with quick, comprehensive action. But people were not business problems. People needed agency, choice, dignity in how they received help. What if we start over? Marcus suggested finally. What if I tell you exactly what I arranged, and you decide what you want to accept or reject? Your choice, your terms. Elena considered this. And if I say no to everything, then I figure out how to undo what I've already set in motion, and we pretend this conversation never happened. And if I say yes to some things, but not others, then we work together to modify the arrangements to fit what you're comfortable with. Robert watched this negotiation with interest. Sounds like you're both learning something about compromise. Elena smiled slightly. Your father is very wise when he's not being stubborn. Must run in the family, Robert said, looking pointedly at his son. That evening, Elena made her decision. She would accept the nursing school scholarship, but she wanted it restructured so that she could maintain her current job schedule and continue caring for Robert. She would let her brother participate in the mentorship program, but she wanted to meet the people involved and understand exactly what expectations came with the opportunity. The rent payment she rejected entirely. I need to know I can take care of my basic needs myself, she explained. But I appreciate that you wanted to help. 3 weeks had passed since Elena and Marcus had reached their compromise about the help he wanted to provide. The house on Maple Street had settled into a comfortable routine that surprised everyone involved. Marcus conducted his business meetings from the kitchen table in the mornings while Elena attended her nursing classes. She would arrive at noon to care for Robert, and the three of them would spend afternoons together, sometimes talking, sometimes sitting in companionable silence on the front porch. Robert's condition had stabilized somewhat. The regular medication schedule, proper nutrition, and Elena's attentive care had given him more good days than bad ones. He even began taking short walks around the neighborhood with Marcus, pointing out changes that had occurred over the 25 years his son had been away. But on this particular Tuesday morning, everything changed. Marcus woke to the sound of his father calling for help. The voice was weak, desperate, and filled with a panic that immediately sent Marcus running toward the bedroom. He found Robert sitting on the edge of the bed, struggling to breathe, his face gray and his hands shaking as he tried to reach for his inhaler. "Dad, what's wrong?" "Can't breathe," Robert gasped between words. "Chest hurts." Marcus grabbed the inhaler and helped his father use it, but it didn't seem to help. Robert's breathing became more labored, and Marcus could see fear in the old man's eyes. Fear that this might be the beginning of the end. "I'm calling an ambulance," Marcus said, reaching for his phone. "No." Robert grabbed his son's arm with surprising strength. "No hospitals. I told you. I want to die at home." "Dad, you're not dying today. This might just be a flare-up. The doctors can help you breathe easier." But Robert was adamant. He had made Marcus promise weeks ago that when the time came, there would be no extraordinary measures, no machines, no futile attempts to extend life beyond its natural course. Robert wanted to die in his own bed, in his own house, with dignity intact. Marcus was torn between respecting his father's wishes and his instinct to do everything possible to save him. While they argued, Elena arrived for her usual shift. She took one look at Robert's condition and immediately began checking his vital signs with the portable equipment she had started bringing to monitor his progress. "His oxygen levels are dangerously low," she told Marcus quietly, "and his heart rate is irregular. He needs medical attention." "I'm not going to any hospital," Robert wheezed. "If this is it, then this is it." Elena sat down on the bed beside Robert, taking his hand gently. "Mr. Blackwell, going to the hospital doesn't mean giving up control. It means getting help so you can come back home and have more good days with Marcus." "You don't understand," Robert said, his voice growing weaker. "I've seen what happens in those places. They hook you up to machines, pump you full of drugs that don't work, and you die anyway, but slower and more expensively." Marcus felt helpless watching his father struggle. Just when they had begun to rebuild their relationship, Robert was slipping away, and Marcus didn't know how to help him without betraying his wishes. Elena seemed to understand both men's dilemma. "What if we call Dr. Martinez and ask him to come here? That way you can get medical help without leaving home." Robert considered this compromise. Dr. Martinez was the family physician who had been treating Robert for years, a man he trusted and respected. After a moment, he nodded weakly. Dr. Martinez arrived within an hour, bringing portable oxygen equipment and emergency medications. After examining Robert, he pulled Marcus and Elena aside to speak privately. "He's having a severe respiratory episode, possibly complicated by a heart arrhythmia," the doctor explained. "I can treat him here for now, but if he has another episode like this, he'll need hospitalization whether he wants it or not." "What's causing this?" Marcus asked. "The cancer has progressed more quickly than we expected. It's putting additional strain on his heart and lungs. We're looking at weeks now, not months." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Weeks. After 25 years apart, They had weeks left together. Dr. Martinez continued, I can keep him comfortable at home for now, but you'll need round-the-clock care. Someone with medical training who can monitor his condition and respond to emergencies. Marcus looked at Elena, who was listening intently to the doctor's instructions. I can arrange for private nurses, Marcus said. The best available. Actually, Dr. Martinez said, Elena might be the best option. She knows your father's preferences, she's been managing his care successfully, and she has enough medical training to handle most situations that might arise. Elena looked surprised. I'm not a nurse yet. I'm still a student. You're in your final semester, Dr. Martinez pointed out. You have more practical experience with geriatric care than many registered nurses. And, more importantly, Robert trusts you. That evening, after Dr. Martinez had stabilized Robert and left detailed instructions for his ongoing care, Marcus and Elena sat in the kitchen discussing the new reality they faced. I can't ask you to put your life on hold to be here 24 hours a day, Marcus said. It's not fair to you. You're not asking. I'm offering. Elena's voice was quiet, but determined. I can arrange my class schedule to be here when he needs me most. It's only for a few more weeks of the semester anyway. Elena, this is going to be difficult. Watching someone die, even when it's expected, takes a toll. And my father can be demanding when he's scared. I know. I've been caring for dying people since I was 16 and watched my mother fade away. It's hard, but it's also important. People deserve to die with dignity, surrounded by people who care about them. Marcus was struck again by Elena's maturity, her strength in the face of difficult circumstances. At 26, she had experienced more loss and responsibility than many people faced in a lifetime. Yet she continued to give of herself without resentment. There's something else we need to discuss, Elena said carefully. Your father is going to become more dependent on help with basic activities. Bathing, using the bathroom, getting dressed. He's a proud man. It might be easier for him to accept help with those things from me rather than from you. Marcus understood what Elena was delicately trying to tell him. Robert would need intimate personal care, and the dynamics between father and son might make that more difficult than necessary. Whatever he needs, Marcus said simply. Whatever makes this easier for him. Over the next few days, they established a new routine centered around Robert's declining condition. Elena moved into the guest room to be available at night, when Robert's breathing was often most difficult. Marcus handled the business aspects of his father's care while maintaining his own work responsibilities as much as possible. It was during this time that Marcus began to truly understand Elena's character. She cared for Robert with a combination of professional competence and genuine affection that amazed him. She anticipated his needs, managed his medications with precision, and somehow maintained his dignity even when helping with the most personal aspects of his care. More importantly, she continued to treat Robert like a person rather than a patient. She brought him books from the library, encouraged him to tell stories about his younger days, and even convinced him to help her with her nursing school homework when he was feeling well enough. Elena asked me to explain wound care procedures, Robert told Marcus one afternoon, clearly pleased to be useful. Turns out all those years of treating cuts and scrapes from the hardware store taught me things they don't cover in textbooks. Marcus watched this interaction with growing admiration for Elena and growing love for the father he was rediscovering. Robert had always been a teacher at heart, even if he hadn't been good at showing it when Marcus was young. Elena had found a way to let him be a teacher again, to feel valuable even as his body failed him. But, as Robert's condition worsened, new challenges arose. He became more confused at times, especially at night. He would wake up disoriented, calling for Marcus's mother, forgetting that she had died years earlier. These episodes were heartbreaking for Marcus, but Elena handled them with patience and grace. It's normal, she explained to Marcus after a particularly difficult night. When people are dying, they often revisit the past. Sometimes they see or hear people who are already gone. It's not necessarily distressing for them, even if it's hard for us to watch. One night, Marcus was awakened by voices from his father's room. He found Elena sitting beside Robert's bed, holding his hand while he talked animatedly about things that had happened decades earlier. Maria used to make the best apple pie, Robert was saying, referring to Marcus's mother. She'd make one every Sunday after church. Marcus would always try to sneak a piece before dinner. That sounds wonderful, Elena said gently. She must have been a good cook. The best. And beautiful, too. I was lucky she agreed to marry me. Don't know what she saw in a stubborn old fool like me. Elena caught sight of Marcus in the doorway and nodded toward a chair, indicating he should join them. For the next hour, they listened as Robert shared memories of his marriage, his young family, the dreams he and Maria had shared for their son's future. I wanted Marcus to have more than I could give him, Robert said, his voice growing thoughtful. But I was scared. Scared that if he aimed too high, he'd get hurt. So I tried to keep his dreams small, safe. That was wrong. You were trying to protect him, Elena said. Parents sometimes do the wrong things for the right reasons. I made him think I didn't believe in him. But I always believed in him. I just didn't know how to show it. Marcus felt tears stinging his eyes. This was the conversation he had needed to have with his father for 25 years. And it was happening now, in the darkness of a bedroom where a dying man was finally speaking the truth he had carried in his heart all along. He knows, Mr. Blackwell, Elena said softly. I think he's always known. The next morning, Robert seemed more alert than he had been in days. He asked Marcus to bring him a box from the top shelf of his bedroom closet. Inside, Marcus found dozens of newspaper clippings about his business successes, articles about his company's innovations, photographs of him receiving awards. Robert had been following his son's career all these years, proud even if he had never been able to say so. I kept everything, Robert said simply. Maria would have been so proud. She would have been proud of you too, Dad, for the way you helped people, the way you took care of the community after I left. I did what I could, but I should have done more. Should have told you I was proud instead of just keeping newspaper clippings. That afternoon, while Robert napped, Marcus and Elena talked about what would happen after his father died. The conversation was difficult, but necessary. I'll help you with the arrangements, Elena offered. And I'll stay as long as you need me to. Grief is complicated, especially when there's been a long estrangement. Marcus realized that Elena had become essential to him in ways that went far beyond her care for his father. She had shown him a different way of being in the world, a way that valued compassion over achievement, connection over success. He had begun to imagine a future that included her, but he didn't know how to express that without seeming to take advantage of the emotional intensity of their situation. As if reading his thoughts, Elena said quietly, "When this is over, things will be different between us. Right now, we're united by taking care of your father. After he's gone, we'll need to figure out who we are to each other outside of this circumstance." "Do you want there to be an after?" Marcus asked. Elena was quiet for a long moment. "I care about you, Marcus. But you're going to go back to your life, your business, your world. I'll finish nursing school and build my career. We come from very different places. That doesn't have to matter, doesn't it? You're used to solving problems with money, making decisions that affect thousands of people, traveling around the world. I'm used to struggling for every small victory, planning my life around other people's needs, staying close to home, because that's where my responsibilities are." Marcus wanted to argue, to tell her that those differences could be strengths rather than obstacles. But he also understood that Elena was being realistic about the challenges they would face. Their feelings for each other had developed in an artificial situation, under extraordinary circumstances. Whether those feelings could survive in the real world remained to be seen. That night, Robert took a turn for the worse. His breathing became increasingly labored, and Dr. Martinez confirmed what they all knew was coming. Robert was dying, and it would happen soon. "Tonight or tomorrow," the doctor said quietly. "I'll stay as long as you need me to." Marcus called Robert's few remaining friends and distant relatives, but most were too elderly or too far away to come quickly. In the end, it would be just Marcus, Elena, and Dr. Martinez to see Robert through his final hours. As evening approached, Robert seemed to rally slightly. He asked to sit up in bed, and he looked at Marcus with eyes that seemed clearer than they had been in days. "I need to tell you something," Robert said, his voice weak but determined. "About Elena." Marcus glanced at Elena, who looked puzzled. "Dad, you should rest." "No, this is important." "Elena, come here." Elena moved closer to the bed, and Robert reached for her hand with trembling fingers. "You've been like a daughter to me these past few months. Better than I deserved. But I need you to know something about my son." "Mr. Blackwell, let me finish." Marcus has money, success, all the things I thought mattered when he was young. But what he really has is character. Good character. He came home when I was dying even though I didn't deserve it. He stayed even though I was difficult. He forgave me even though I hurt him. That's the measure of a man. Robert looked at his son. And Elena has something you need to learn about, son. She has roots. Loyalty. The kind of love that doesn't depend on circumstances being perfect. You'd be a fool to let her go. Marcus had just dozed off in the chair beside his father's bed when he was jolted awake by shouting from the front of the house. Elena's voice, usually so gentle and controlled, was raised in anger and what sounded like disbelief. Then he heard another voice, a man's voice, speaking in rapid Spanish. Confused and still groggy from his brief sleep, Marcus carefully extracted his hand from his father's weak grip and moved toward the living room. What he saw there made him stop dead in the doorway. Elena was standing in the middle of the room, her arms crossed, facing a well-dressed man in an expensive suit. The man was perhaps 50 years old, with graying hair and the kind of commanding presence that Marcus recognized from his own business world. But what shocked Marcus was the family resemblance between this man and Elena. The same dark eyes, the same stubborn set to the jaw, the same expressive hands that moved as they spoke. "You cannot be serious, Elena," the man was saying in English, clearly for Marcus's benefit. "Working as a maid for some old man, when you should be home taking care of family business." "I am taking care of family business, Uncle Carlos," Elena replied coldly. "I'm taking care of my education, my brother's future, and people who actually need help. Your brother called me. He told me about this mysterious scholarship program, this job with some Billionaire's charity foundation. Do you think I'm stupid? Do you think I don't know what's really happening here?" Marcus realized with growing alarm that Elena had never mentioned any family beyond her younger brother. The way she had talked, it seemed like they were alone in the world after her parents died. Yet here was a well-dressed, obviously wealthy uncle who seemed to have strong opinions about Elena's life choices. "What's happening here," Elena said icily, "is that I'm working hard to build a better life for David and myself. Something you've never offered to help with." Carlos laughed, but it was not a pleasant sound. "Help? Elena, I've been trying to help for years. I've offered you jobs, education, a place in the family business. You're the one who's been too proud to accept. Your kind of help comes with strings attached. Your kind of help means giving up who I am to become who you think I should be." Marcus remained frozen in the doorway, unsure whether he should interrupt this obviously private family argument. But Carlos noticed him and immediately shifted his attention. "And you must be the billionaire who's been playing with my niece's life," Carlos said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Marcus Blackwell. I've done my research." "Uncle Carlos, stop," Elena warned. But Carlos was just getting started. "Did you know, Mr. Blackwell, that my niece is not actually the poor struggling student she's pretended to be? Did you know that her family owns one of the most successful construction companies in 3 states? Marcus felt the world tilt around him. Elena, who he had seen skipping meals to save money, who wore mended clothes and drove a car held together with prayer and duct tape, came from wealth? "That's not my family," Elena said firmly. "That's your family. My father walked away from all of that when he married my mother. He chose a different life. A life of poverty and struggle," Carlos shot back. "A life that got him killed on a construction site because he was too proud to use the safety equipment and training that our company provides." The pain that flashed across Elena's face made Marcus want to step forward and defend her, but he was still too stunned by these revelations to move. "My father died because some contractor cut corners on safety regulations," Elena said quietly. "Not because he was proud, because someone decided that saving money was more important than protecting workers. Your father died because he refused to work for the family business where he would have been safe. He preferred to prove his independence rather than accept help from people who loved him." Marcus saw Elena flinch at those words, and suddenly, he understood the deeper pain behind her reaction to his own attempts to help her. Her father had made the same choice she was making, rejecting family assistance to maintain his independence. And that choice had cost him his life. "Elena never told me she had family besides her brother," Marcus said finally, finding his voice. Carlos turned his attention back to Marcus with obvious satisfaction. I'm sure there are many things my niece hasn't told you. For instance, did she mention that she's the primary heir to my brother's estate? That there's a trust fund worth several $1 million waiting for her as soon as she agrees to claim it? Marcus stared at Elena, who was looking everywhere except at him. Is that true? It's complicated, Elena said quietly. It's not complicated at all, Carlos interrupted. My brother left everything to his children. Elena has refused to claim her inheritance for 3 years because accepting it would mean acknowledging that she needs her family. It would mean accepting money from people who treated my father like a disappointment, Elena said, finally, looking at Marcus. Money that comes with expectations about how I should live my life, who I should marry, what career I should choose. We want what's best for you, Carlos said. But his tone suggested that he believed he knew what was best better than Elena did herself. You want control, Elena corrected. You want me to come back, work for the company, marry someone you approve of, and pretend that my father's choices were mistakes that need to be corrected. Marcus began to understand the complexity of Elena's situation. She wasn't just rejecting charity from a stranger. She was rejecting a family legacy that came with strings she found unacceptable. But it also meant that everything he thought he knew about her financial situation had been a lie, or at least a massive omission. Why didn't you tell me? Marcus asked, his voice carefully neutral. Because I knew you would react exactly like you're reacting now. Like I've been lying to you. Haven't you been lying to me? I've been living my life according to my own choices. That's not the same thing as lying. Carlos watched this exchange with obvious interest. You see? She keeps secrets. She makes decisions based on pride rather than practicality. Just like her father. My father made decisions based on principle, Elena said angrily. Something your family has always had trouble understanding. Principle doesn't keep you fed, Elena. Principle doesn't pay for medical school or take care of your brother. Pride is a luxury that poor people can't afford. But I'm not poor, according to you. So what's your real objection here? Carlos was quiet for a moment, clearly frustrated by Elena's logic. My objection is that you're wasting your life taking care of strangers when you could be taking care of family. You're working as a servant when you could be running a company. I'm studying to be a nurse because I want to help people. I'm caring for Mr. Blackwell because he's a good man who needs help. These aren't sacrifices or compromises. These are choices I've made because they reflect who I want to be. And who you want to be is a maid. The contempt in Carlos's voice made Marcus angry. Elena is not a maid, he said firmly. She's a skilled caregiver, a nursing student, and one of the most compassionate people I've ever met. There's no shame in any of that. Carlos laughed. Of course you defend her. You've been the beneficiary of her misguided charity. But what happens when your father dies, and you go back to your life? Will you take Elena with you? Will you marry the maid, and make her part of your world? The directness of the question hung in the air like smoke. Marcus realized that Carlos was asking the same questions Elena herself had raised, the questions about whether their relationship could survive outside the crisis that had brought them together. That's between Elena and me, Marcus said carefully. Is it? Because from where I stand, it looks like you've been playing house with my niece, letting her take care of your family problems while you figure out whether she's worth keeping around permanently. Elena stepped between the two men. Stop it. Both of you. You're talking about me like I'm not here, like I don't get to make my own decisions about my own life. She turned to her uncle. Uncle Carlos, I appreciate that you think you're looking out for me. But I'm 26 years old. I've been taking care of myself and David for 3 years. We're doing fine. You're not doing fine. You're struggling unnecessarily because you're too stubborn to accept help. I'm living according to my own values. There's a difference. Carlos shook his head in frustration. Your father said the same thing, right up until he died and left you and David with nothing. The cruelty of that statement made Elena flinch as if she had been slapped. Marcus saw tears spring to her eyes, and he stepped forward without thinking. That's enough, Marcus said quietly, but his voice carried the authority he used in boardrooms when discussions got out of hand. Elena doesn't need to justify her choices to you or to me. If she wants to refuse her inheritance, that's her right. If she wants to work while going to school, that's her choice. You don't get to make those decisions for her. Carlos studied Marcus with new interest. Very protective of her, aren't you? For someone who's just an employer. Elena is. Marcus paused, realizing he didn't have words to describe what Elena had become to him. Elena is important to me. Important enough to marry her? Important enough to change your life for her? Because that's what it would take, you know. Elena won't be anyone's kept woman. She won't be the pretty accessory who makes you feel good about yourself. If you want her, you'll have to accept all of her, including the fact that she'll never stop helping people who need it, even when it's inconvenient for you. Marcus realized that Carlos was testing him, pushing him to declare his intentions publicly. But, before he could answer, they were interrupted by a weak voice from the bedroom. Elena. Robert was calling, his voice barely audible. Elena immediately turned away from both men and hurried toward the bedroom. Marcus followed, leaving Carlos standing alone in the living room. Robert was awake, but clearly struggling. His breathing was more labored than it had been earlier, and his skin had taken on a grayish pallor that Marcus recognized with a sinking heart. The shouting woke me, Robert said weakly. Everything okay? Everything's fine, Mr. Blackwell, Elena said gently, taking his hand and checking his pulse. Just some family business. Nothing for you to worry about. But Robert had been around long enough to recognize family drama when he heard it. Sounded like someone was giving you trouble. My uncle thinks I should make different choices about my life. Robert nodded slowly. Families are good at that, thinking they know what's best for you better than you know yourself. He's not wrong about everything, Elena said quietly. Maybe I have been too proud to accept help when I needed it. There's a difference between being proud and having standards, Robert said, his voice growing weaker. Don't let anyone make you feel ashamed for having standards. Carlos appeared in the doorway, having apparently decided that the family argument was less important than the dying man in the bedroom. I'm sorry if our discussion disturbed you, Mr. Blackwell. I didn't realize you were so ill. I'm dying, Robert said matter-of-factly. Elena's been taking care of me these past few months. Best caregiver I could ask for. Carlos studied Robert with the same appraising look he had given Marcus. I can see why Elena is devoted to you. She's always been drawn to people who need help. Maybe that's because she knows what it's like to need help herself, Robert said. Takes someone who's been vulnerable to really understand how to help others without taking away their dignity. The observation was pointed, and Marcus saw both Elena and Carlos react to it. Robert, even in his dying state, had managed to cut to the heart of their family conflict. Mr. Blackwell, Carlos said carefully, may I ask you something? What do you think Elena should do about her future? About the opportunities she's been offered? Robert was quiet for several minutes, his breathing labored. When he finally spoke, his words were slow but clear. I think Elena should do whatever makes her feel proud of herself when she goes to sleep at night. Money, family approval, security, none of that matters if you can't live with the person you see in the mirror. He turned his fading gaze to Elena. You've spent 3 years taking care of everyone else. Maybe it's time to think about what you want for yourself, not what everyone else wants for you. Robert Blackwell died peacefully at dawn, with Elena holding one hand and Marcus holding the other. His last words were barely audible whispers of gratitude for both of them being there. Dr. Martinez officially pronounced the time of death at 6:47 a.m. on a Thursday morning that felt both ordinary and earth-changing at the same time. Carlos had waited respectfully in the living room during Robert's final hours, and when it was over, he quietly offered his condolences to Marcus before embracing Elena as she wept for the man who had become like a father to her over the past few months. The next few days blurred together in a series of necessary tasks and difficult emotions. Marcus handled the funeral arrangements while Elena dealt with the practical aspects of closing down the medical equipment and notifying the various agencies that had been involved in Robert's care. Carlos remained in town, staying at a local hotel, but he kept his opinions to himself and helped wherever he could. The funeral was small but meaningful. A few elderly neighbors attended, along with some former customers from the hardware store who remembered Robert fondly. Elena's brother David drove down for the service, and Marcus was touched to see how many lives his father had quietly touched over the years. During the graveside service, Marcus finally spoke the words he had never been able to say to his father directly. I forgive you for the things you said when I was young. I hope you can forgive me for staying away so long. I'm proud to be your son. Elena stood beside him, tears streaming down her face, and Marcus realized that she was grieving not just for Robert, but for all the losses in her own life that Robert's death had brought back to the surface. After the funeral, the three of them returned to the house on Maple Street, which now felt empty and strange without Robert's presence. Carlos finally broke the silence that had maintained between him and Elena since their argument. "Elena, I owe you an apology. I came here thinking I knew what was best for you, but I didn't understand the situation. Mr. Blackwell was lucky to have you caring for him, and you were right to honor that commitment." Elena nodded, accepting the apology but still maintaining some distance. "I'm still not coming back to work for the company, Uncle Carlos. I know. I can see that you've built something here, something important. But I hope you'll consider staying in touch with the family. David shouldn't have to choose between his sister and his heritage." That evening, after Carlos had returned to his hotel, Marcus and Elena sat together in the kitchen where they had shared so many conversations over the past months. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken questions and unresolved feelings. "I need to apologize too," Elena said finally. "I should have told you about my family situation from the beginning. Why didn't you?" Elena was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands folded on the table. "Because I wanted you to see me for who I am, not for who my family thinks I should be. When you're part of a wealthy family, people always wonder about your motivations. Are you working because you want to, or because you're rebelling? Are you helping people because you care, or because you're trying to prove something?" Marcus understood that feeling more than Elena might realize. "I spent years having people wonder if I earned my success, or if I was just lucky. It's exhausting to have your choices questioned constantly." "Exactly. So when I met you, I wanted our relationship to be based on who we actually are, not on assumptions about what we can afford or what we're entitled to. But, Elena, knowing about your family doesn't change how I see you. If anything, it makes your choices more meaningful. You could have taken the easy path, but you chose to build something yourself. The way you chose to leave your father's expectations behind and build your own life." Marcus smiled sadly. "I guess we're both more similar than I realized. Two people running away from families who wanted to control our futures. The difference is that you succeeded in getting away. I never really did. Uncle Carlos found me eventually. They talked late into the night about their families, their choices, their fears about the future." Marcus learned that Elena had always felt torn between loyalty to her family's legacy and her desire to create her own path. Her father's death had intensified that conflict, making it impossible for her to accept help from people who had disapproved of his choices. "What will you do now?" Marcus asked as the first light of dawn began to filter through the kitchen windows. "I'll finish nursing school. I'll find a job, probably in geriatric care or hospice work. I'll make sure David gets through college without having to depend on Uncle Carlos if he doesn't want to." "That's not what I meant." Elena met his eyes directly. "I know what you meant. But, Marcus, what we had these past few months, it was real, but it was also artificial. We were thrown together by circumstances, united by taking care of your father. Now that he's gone, we need to figure out who we are to each other in the real world. I know who you are to me. Do you? Because a few days ago you thought I was a struggling single mother working 3 jobs to make ends meet. Now you know I'm the heir to millions of dollars who chose to live like she was poor. That changes things." Marcus wanted to argue, but he knew Elena was right. The revelations about her family had forced him to reconsider everything he thought he knew about her motivations and circumstances. Not because it made him love her less, but because it made her choices more complex than he had understood. "Can I tell you what I see when I look at you?" Marcus asked. Elena nodded. "I see someone who has the courage to live according to her values, even when it costs her. I see someone who chooses the harder path because it's the right path for her. I see someone who cares more about doing meaningful work than about being comfortable." He paused, trying to find words for feelings that had grown deeper than he had realized. "I see someone who made my father's last months better than they had any right to be. Someone who taught me that success isn't just about building companies or making money. Someone who showed me that home isn't a place, it's the people you choose to love." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Marcus, I'm not finished. I also see someone who's afraid that accepting love means giving up independence. Someone who thinks that needing another person makes her weak. Someone who's been hurt by people who claim to love her but really wanted to control her. That's not fair, isn't it? Elena, you rejected help from your family because you were afraid of losing yourself. You almost rejected help from me for the same reason. At what point do you trust someone enough to let them be part of your life without losing who you are? Elena was quiet for a long time, and Marcus could see her struggling with the questions he had raised. Finally, she spoke. What are you asking me, Marcus? I'm asking if you can imagine a life where we're together, but you don't have to choose between me and your independence. Where you can be a nurse, help people, live according to your values, and still let someone love you completely. And what would you give up in this imaginary life? The question caught Marcus off guard. What do you mean? I mean that compromise works both ways. You're asking me to trust that I won't lose myself if I let you into my life. But what are you willing to change about your life to make room for me? Are you willing to slow down your business travel so we can have a real relationship? Are you willing to live somewhere other than a penthouse in a major city? Are you willing to let me use my inheritance to fund a free clinic instead of investing it in your portfolio? Marcus realized that Elena was right to push back. He had been asking her to trust him with her future without considering what sacrifices he might need to make for their relationship to work. I'll change whatever needs to be changed, he said simply. That's what every man says when he's trying to convince a woman to be with him. But what about when the novelty wears off? What about when my need to help people becomes inconvenient for your schedule? What about when I want to spend our vacation working in a refugee camp instead of relaxing on a private beach? Then, we'll work in a refugee camp. Elena stared at him as if she was trying to determine whether he was serious. You don't even know what that would involve. Then, teach me. Elena, I've spent 25 years building a business empire, and you know what I learned? Then, he looked at Marcus. And you need to decide what kind of man you want to be. The kind who loves someone because she makes his life easier, or the kind who loves someone enough to make his life more complicated if that's what she needs. With that pronouncement, Robert closed his eyes and seemed to sink deeper into the bed. Elena immediately began checking his vital signs while Carlos and Marcus stood awkwardly on opposite sides of the small bedroom. Dr. Martinez, who had been dozing in the kitchen, appeared with his medical bag. After examining Robert, he pulled them aside once again. It's time, he said simply. He has maybe hours, possibly less. As Elena began the process of making Robert comfortable for his final hours, Marcus realized that his father was about to die in the middle of a family crisis that involved the woman he was falling in love with. And somehow, Robert's final words had made it clear that Marcus was going to have to choose not just what he wanted from Elena, but what he was willing to give up for her. As the evening progressed, and Robert slipped in and out of consciousness, Marcus and Elena took turns sitting beside him, holding his hand, telling him he was not alone. And as dawn broke on what would be Robert Blackwell's last day, none of them could have predicted the shock that was waiting for them when the front door opened, and Elena's voice filled the house with anger and disbelief. Marcus was disappointed that she wouldn't accept more assistance, but he respected her decision. They worked together to modify the arrangements, and by the end of the week, Elena had a plan that allowed her to pursue her education while maintaining her independence. But as they settled into this new normal, none of them realized that they were about to face a crisis that would test all of their relationships in ways they could never have anticipated. But he also noticed things that troubled him. Elena was thin, too thin, as if she wasn't eating enough. Her car was old and unreliable. Her clothes, while clean and neat, were worn and mended. She worked too hard for too little money, and she never complained about any of it. One afternoon, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He called his assistant and had her research Elena's background, not to invade her privacy, but to understand how he could help her. What he learned made him angry and determined. Elena was indeed studying nursing, but she had been forced to reduce her course load because she couldn't afford full-time tuition. She was behind on her rent, her brother needed money for school supplies, and she had been skipping meals to make sure there was enough food for him. Meanwhile, she continued to care for Robert without accepting payment because she knew the family had no money. That evening, after Elena had gone home and Robert had gone to bed early, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and made arrangements that would have shocked his business associates. He was about to do something completely contrary to his usual careful, calculated approach to philanthropy. He was about to change Elena's life, whether she wanted him to or not.